I was trying to be a great father. One of those moments. And there was a specific moment within the larger story where I felt like I was utterly failing. I'll tell it to you because Andrew, my firstborn, was obsessed with trains when he was little. Now, we live probably a quarter mile from the train track that runs north to south from Houston all the way up. And when he was little, he would hear the whistle from far away, and we would have to rush either on our bikes or get in the truck and drive down. He would want to see it. Thomas the Tank Engine. We have a small investment in Thomas the Tank Engine trains that are now safely in our attic waiting for grandchildren or great-grandchildren or whatever. So one of the things when he was maybe 5 or 6 years old, I had the idea to take a little father-son trip. We did that a lot, and we still do that. Father-daughter trips, mother-son, mother-daughter trips. We try to do it. We only have 2 kids, and so a little bit more opportunity. And so I thought, well, let's get in a plane and go to one of the only working that I know of in the general vicinity of Texas, coal steam engines that goes from Durango, Colorado. You probably know it. From Durango, Colorado, up to the San Juan Mountains to Silverton, and it turns around and comes back. And so we got on a plane, just the 2 of us, maybe 5 or 6 years old, and we flew to Denver, and then we changed planes. The first time he had flown, he was loving it. Then we got on a little commuter jet. It was one of the lopsided aisles. You've ever been on a plane like that? So there's one attendant, and they have to kind of duck as they go down. There's 1 seat on one side of the plane, and then there's 2 seats on the other. So I don't know what the capacity is, but it's very small. It's a little commuter jet, goes up over the Rockies and lands in the Durango airport, right? Regional airport. You may take it to Eagle. You may take it a lot of places in and around the Rockies. And what I didn't know was that flight is famous. You may know, I didn't. That flight is famous because it's a small plane, it's a light plane, and the air over the Rockies is notoriously difficult. And so we're climbing altitude from Denver, going over the city, and going up to the Rockies, and we're still climbing. And the attendant has come out with the cart, very small cart, just enough time to really give out drinks, because it's not that long of a flight. And I recall specifically, I was seated here, facing the front as always. Andrew was seated here next to the window. There was nobody seated next to me just that 1 seat across the aisle or here, just 2 seats, aisle here. And this gentleman attendant comes by, and he's handing drinks from the front, and he's making his way to us. I asked Andrew what he wants. I remember he wants an orange juice, and I get something else. I can't remember, sparkling water or something like that. And right as the attendant is approaching us, the turbulence, this is the notorious flight with the unpredictable air over the Rockies. The turbulence starts, and the plane is really going through it. And I'm like, okay, here we go. And I'm pulling my seatbelt, and it slows down a little bit, and then he hands, right as he hands the orange juice and the sparkling water to me, it goes from a 4 to a 9, the turbulence, okay? I remember this because 2 things happened. The flight attendant had to sit in the empty seat. He didn't even have time to go back. And he puts the seatbelt on the empty seat, and then he just hugs the cart with his arms and knees. And I'm like, that's not going to work, mate. That's like 200 pounds. Somebody's going to die in the aisle, right? And then I am holding my drinks out like this in the aisle and trying to match the turbulence with the drinks and just not slosh them everywhere. I'm getting really nervous. I'm expecting like the air things to come down, the mask, all the stuff. It was one of those closest that we've ever been to that. And so this is the moment. I'm freaking out. He's the professional, and I'm looking at him. I'm like, he's scared. That doesn't make me feel any better when the dude is scared. And he probably does this flight regularly, right? And so I am not in a good place. Although I'm not really scared of flying. I'm not scared of heights. Not particularly scared of dying. Most people say that if they're not in a life-threatening situation. But anyway, I was okay. But here, I'm nervous. And then this is when I see my son. I am freaking out. Attendant dude is freaking out. Everybody in the plane does this gasping and it's every time because the plane is doing this. I look over at Andrew. He is staring out the window with the biggest smile on his face. Doesn't even know that I'm scared. doesn't even know that the plane has an attendant. He's not, because he is looking out and he looks back at me. And I'm like, I tap him on the shoulder with my elbow, trying to keep the orange juice off of me and him. And he just looks back with a big smile and goes right back to the window. I was shocked. It was like that for a long time. I don't think we drank much of the drink. He finally got the cart back. We came back in. And I think the pilot even said, well, guys, we made it, but sort of barely, It was one of those flights. I'd like to talk to you about the difference between my 5-6-year-old son on the window seat and me and the attendant in the aisle, a little bit. Because what I see today in the text is really a small picture. That's a small picture of what I see in the text. We'll be back in the Gospel of John today, which is where we've been since the beginning of our church life, when we started on January 12th. Just around the corner here, our first Sunday gathering together at 3 p.m. It's always been at 3 p.m. And will be probably until the Lord provides us a place of our own, or we're following Him and all of that. But 3 p.m. since January, we started the Gospel of John. We took a little bit of time off for a parenting weekend, 2 Sundays in a row to talk about parenting. And then last Sunday, I felt as a pastor we needed to pause and really talk about the cultural moment that we're in. And so we weren't in John last week, and if you were with us, you know what we did and why we did it. And if you're paying attention to the news or watching this cultural moment play out before us, even in social media, with the large layer of misunderstanding and malignment and all misquoting and all the things that happen in the blogosphere and the web world, right? About what's going on. And so what we talked about last week, I just wanted to share with you 4 things last week and then give a pastoral charge to you. And so just by way of very short recap, if you weren't with us. The one thing I wanted to say after the 24th anniversary of 9/11, a school shooting in Colorado, another shooting on Annapolis, the video that I saw of Irina Zarutska that I know that happened back in August, but I only saw it last week. And of course, maybe the main largest news with the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And I just felt it appropriate to pause and to talk about 4 things. And the first one was this, is that we are in an active war in an alien world. That's the reality. That's what the Bible says. I'm not using violent language. I'm just using, especially not espousing violence, because Jesus didn't. No one in the scriptures by the Spirit of God does. Just saying that that's the biblical idea of how we're in this life together. Paul, John, Jesus, they all use the language of a spiritual battle. And that's point number 2. The active war in the alien world is a specific kind of war. Number 2, it's a spiritual war. Ephesians 6, our battle is not against flesh and blood. 2 Corinthians 10, we do not wage war as in the flesh. We do it in a spiritual way, taking down everything set up against God. Number 3 was the biggest point that we spent some time on. I've been thinking about it all week as God sort of gave those words to me, and we talked about them, and you've been talking with me about them since then. And that is that the enemy has a very clear strategy, same from the very beginning. He's still playing out that strategy for us. One of my mentors would always say, the enemy's not so much creative as he is persistent. He just sticks to the same thing. He, of course, has had thousands and thousands of years to observe human behavior, so he's sharpening his strategy, but it's essentially the same strategy. 1, to diminish the truth, to make, as he did in the garden, the things that God said are good out to be not good, and the things that God said are deadly, the enemy wants to shape those into something really, really tempting, and he says that they're good. And so he flips everything on its head and tries to diminish the truth. He can't destroy the truth. Best he can do is throw some rust on it and try to corrupt it, try to call it into question, diminish it. The second thing that he tries to do always since the beginning, we saw it in the garden, is divide the people from each other. Divide the people from each other. If we can get one person to blame another person for their problems, then the enemy is winning in their strategy, especially if that person does not look inward first. If that person doesn't look inward and say, hey, man, I've got some prejudices, I've got some selfishness in mind, I've got some arrogance and pride, I've got some blind spots and some things that I'm convinced to be true but probably aren't, and I should start with humility first. But no, the enemy says, no, just blame the other person. All of your problems are because of this group, that person, whatever. Divide the people. Finally, he says, I think he wants to disarm the church. Since the people of God were chosen by God all the way from the Old Testament into the church of the New Testament, we are, by God's grace, he says, the most powerful entity on earth. The gates of hell will not prevail against his church. It's not our strength and power, it's his by his Spirit. And the best that the enemy can do is try to take the weapons that God gives us out of our hands. These aren't flesh and blood weapons. These aren't violent weapons. These are spiritual weapons, the shield of faith, the sword of the Spirit, prayer, the truth, the gospel, these things. If we can take those out of our hands, then we become more and more impotent and less powerful. And then we talked about our command. The invitation and command from God for us is very clear too. We are one to resolve to stand firm in our conviction, stand firm in our hold of the truth, both theological and gospel truth, relational truth. We are to endure sufferings well as Jesus did, and we are to champion holiness. One of the things I feel really, really strongly about is when the current disciples of this false, counterfeit, cultural pantheon of gods come to their senses and begin to see that those gods are failing them, they're going to become refugees of this movement. And when they become refugees of this current false system in the world, where will they go for truth and light and salvation and hope and community? They better come to a church that's pure and holy. And I want them to. I want them to come here. I want them to come to all of the Christ-honoring churches in our area and world. But if we compromise and slowly slide away, they won't have any great place to go. They won't have any clean place to go. Finally, my pastoral charge was to let's pay close attention in this time. Tune our hearts to pay attention to places where fear might be popping up in our hearts. Places where despair might be popping up in our hearts. And most especially, I think, places where misdirected anger are popping up. Especially if we have moments where we sit anonymously behind a keyboard late at night and we just let everybody know exactly how we feel with no filters. Watch for misdirected anger, fear, and despair in those moments. And so I want to bring all of that back to the Gospel of John and slow down a bit as we walk into the very last week of Jesus' life. Actually, for the next couple of months, as we walk into the passion of Jesus, there are times when we're going to crawl through the text instead of run, because that's what John does. John has rushed us through to get us to chapter 12 and 13 and following, and then he screeches the brakes and slows way down. And so we're going to slow way down. So we'll be in the Gospel of John if you have your Bibles. If not, it'll be up on the screen, Gospel of John chapter 12. And what our friend Leslie said, and as we sang about just a second ago, the day before this, the day that we're talking about right now in our text is Sunday, the Sunday of Passover, meaning that the Sunday before Jesus died. So Sunday is the day we're going to look at now, his official entrance into Jerusalem. Monday, he's in the temple. Tuesday, he's in the temple teaching. Wednesday, he's in the temple, then has a long conversation with the disciples. Thursday is Passover, Last Supper with the disciples. He gets arrested that night, spends the night in jail. Friday's the day that he dies. Buried at the end of the day before the stars come out. Saturday is silent Sabbath. We don't know any information of what anybody was doing during that day except hiding in fear. And then Sunday, the next Sunday, 8 days from this day, is the day of his resurrection. This is where we are in the story of Jesus. And so we're going to stop and crawl a little bit. I've got two very simple things to share with you today. Very simple. I'm excited about that. One of them is the greatest news ever. The second one is the hardest thing that Jesus will ever ask you to do. You excited? Woo! Be warm and filled. Okay, all right. The greatest news ever and the hardest thing Jesus will ever ask you to do. But it's the essence of following Jesus. It's the very heart of it. And so we see that in the text. It's really, really beautiful. Let's look at the text together in John chapter 12. I'll read it all to you. It's just a few verses. Chapter 12, verse 12. On the next day, pause just for a second and say the day before that, the Monday before that, the Saturday before Sunday. That's the day that comes before Sunday. Scott, Saturday that comes before Sunday is what Leslie sang about, what we sang in the song about, when Mary anoints the feet of Jesus in preparation for his burial. That's just yesterday in our story, okay? That's the story in the first part of chapter 12. So on the next day, the large crowd who had come to the feast, that's Passover, when they had heard that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem, took the branches of the palm trees and went out to meet him and began to shout, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, even the King of Israel. Jesus, finding a young donkey, sat on it, as it is written, Fear not, daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming, seated on a donkey's colt. These things his disciples did not understand at first, but when Jesus was glorified, then they remembered that these things were written of him and that they had done these things to him. So the people who were with him when he called Lazarus out of the tomb, that's chapter 11, and raised him from the dead, continued to testify about him. For this reason also the people went and met him because they had heard that he had performed this sign. So the Pharisees said to one another, You see, you're not doing any good. Look, the world has gone after him. Now there were some Greeks among those who were going up to worship at the feast, and these then came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida of Galilee, and began to ask him, saying, Sir, we wish to see Jesus. Philip comes and tells Andrew, and Andrew and Philip come and tell Jesus, and Jesus answered them, saying, The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Truly, truly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. He who loves his life loses it, and he who hates his life in this world will keep it to life eternal. If anyone serves me, he must follow me, and where I am, there my servant will be also. If anyone serves me, the Father will honor him. It's a beautiful text. Two things I want to point out. If we go back to the beginning, verse 12. On the next day, the large crowd who come to the feast, when they had heard that Jesus was coming, they took branches, palm trees, laid it out. There's a picture here, a couple of art pieces, just to get your mind included. We go to the first one. This is a picture of, you can tell it's much later. I wanted to get an oil painting. It's much later. This is about 1,000 years ago, not 2,000 years ago. Why? Well, on the Temple Mount is not the temple, but the dome on the rock before it got the gold top. Okay? And so that's about 1,000 years ago, but this is what it would have looked like, very, very close to this. As you come from Bethany and Bethphage over the top of the Mount of Olives, and then you begin to look down on Mount Moriah and then Mount Zion back to your left. You would look down on the Temple Mount. Mount of Olives is higher than Mount Moriah, where the Temple Mount is. And as Jesus comes from Bethphage, the house of figs, and Bethany, through the Mount of Olives, where olive orchards were everywhere, goes down the ascent near the Garden of Gethsemane, which is an olive press. That's what Gethsemane means. Through the Kidron Valley, which is here, then it entered into the eastern gate of the temple. So this is what he would have seen. The next picture is from Van Dyck. He's a famous Flemish Baroque painter. He's one of my favorite. He just uses bold pictures, bold colors, big. He was a student of Rubens, and he painted this incredibly in the 1600s when he was 18 years old. And you can see, I know that the light is different, but you can see the donkey seated under Jesus in the blue and red. You can barely see him. The disciples are questioning in the back. The crowds are going in the front. The guy is laying branches down in front of him. This last one is from Enrique Simonet. It's one of my favorite. It's Jesus, before he gets on the donkey, now looking over the temple and weeping over it. Because there was a moment you could see in our text where he's walking with the crowds, And then his disciples, whom Matthew, Mark, and Luke, he sends his disciples to find the donkey. They bring the donkey, then he gets on the donkey to fulfill prophecy. But he's walking and he's riding on this, in this moment. And this moment is incredible. What do they say in the text? The crowds shout, Hosanna! This is an Aramaic phrase transliterated into Greek. It means save us now, Lord, save us now. But it probably became just an explanation of praise, of like, praise God, this is good, and a prayer at the same time. But then they quote Psalm 118, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Watch, even the King of Israel. See what they're saying? This person, they're claiming, could this be the Messiah? This is the one we've been waiting for. Here's the good news. First thing I wanted to tell you was Jesus finding a donkey, sat on it, as it is written in Zechariah and in Isaiah. Fear not, daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming, seated on a donkey's colt. The fear not in the text comes from Isaiah, and then behold, your king is coming to you. King is attached to what they said, the king of Israel. The king is coming to you, seated on a donkey's colt. Why donkey? Why the prophet specifies a donkey? Well, in context for both Jews and even stretches into Roman culture a little bit, when a king is riding on a horse, this means something. This means wartime. This means battle, the heightened expectations when a king is riding on a horse. When a king is riding on a donkey, or when leaders are riding on a donkey, this is peace. This is times of shalom. So why, look, fear not. Don't be afraid, Zion. Your king is coming to you. And how is he coming? He's coming in peace. He's coming in peace. That's John's version in chapter 12. Now, the same guy wrote Revelation 19. In Revelation 19, the heavens part, and the same Jesus, who looks very different. His eyes are a burning flame. His tongue is a sharp sword. He's got a name written on his thigh that no one knows. And he is riding a horse coming out of heaven. And behind him are all the martyrs and the saints wearing their white linen robes. And now, he's not coming so much in peace, he's coming in power. And when he comes, you can read Revelation 19, the earth shakes. Those who have rejected and fought against God are the ones shaking in their literal boots. And the streets are bloody. This is not peace, this is power. But now, fear not, O daughter of Zion. Your king is coming, and he's coming in peace. This is the good news. Friends, there are a lot right now in this world, and in our nation in particular, that seem to be, and I pray, and I believe it is, but I pray that it's also real. They seem to be leaning into faith, leaning into Jesus a little bit more, particularly in the younger generations. And I celebrate that. I don't know in any other specific generation, at least for a few. I'm Gen X, millennials. They have been, statistically speaking, in all the books that I've read, the ones who have sort of moved away most from God and checked none under religious affiliation when they come to the surveys, right? And so the group of people called the nones, the N-O-N-E-S, no religious affiliation, has risen in those couple of generations. But when you come back to Gen Z, God seems to be changing things. And I celebrate that. I think it's because of a lot of different things, but it is also because of a lot of churches, a lot of pastors, a lot of parachurch ministries, a lot of college ministries, and actually people like Charlie Kirk. You think that most people think perhaps or would describe him as a political activist or a political pundit. And he was, of course, that in most. I don't think he was that first. I think he was a believer in Jesus first. I think I would describe him almost like a generational prophet, a cultural evangelist. And he targeted Gen Z, young voters, young people in college who were trying to understand how to live in this world. What I think he loved to do is give them permission to have a voice. There was a silencing of that generation. Almost as if the world, the enemy's focus, was saying to them, just shut up and follow the way. Just shut up and do what everyone else is doing. Just get into the flow of the river. None of them were saying, this river is poisoned. It's not going in the right direction. What I think Charlie and many others like him came and said, no, actually, you have a voice. You can make your own decisions. You can choose to be counter what this world is. I think that's why I have never, in my lifetime, I don't know of anything like this. I think that's why today, just a couple hours ago, maybe 100,000 people came to memorial service for him. And maybe another 300,000 people watched online. I don't know if you saw any of it. I was trying to stream it as we came here. We listened to it a little bit before and all the worship. But his pastor spoke, and I think offered the gospel. And I hope it's true. Can you imagine? Tens of thousands of people gave their life to Jesus today for the first time. I don't know if that's true, but it sure seemed that way. And I'm excited about that. I don't know of any other event like that in my lifetime that was so powerful. I pray it's durable. I pray it stays. I pray it keeps going and feeds. But the good news is that Jesus has come in peace, and he is offering you life. I don't know where you are. I know many of you, and the ones that I know in the room, you've trusted in Jesus. I don't know all of you. So if you're here and you're like, man, I'm searching. I feel like I need to find a difference. I need something real. I'm here to tell you, without any arrogance in my person, I'm here to tell you the truth is that Jesus is the only source of life. We're going to get to the second thing in a second. And if you've been drinking from every other well and haven't found your thirst quenched, then I would implore you. Jesus is the living water, the bread out of heaven. He is the only source of life. He is God eternal. He came into this earth in the gospel accounts at a specific moment. But he's lived forever. There was never a time when Jesus was not. He came to show us what God is like, what God's will is, and then to do the unthinkable. To die in our place, because there was no possible way for you or me or the best of us, not Mother Teresa, not Billy Graham, not anybody, to make our own way back to God. We could never earn our way into eternal life, into heaven. It's not possible. Because the standard is 100% of the time. It's perfection, and none of us are perfect. And so Jesus knew that. God knew that from the foundation of the world. And so Jesus came and said, I want to show you the Father. I'm not here to tell you, hey, try a little harder. Hey, if you do it this way, you can win. Hey, wake up. No, he did, of course, say that, but he said, you can't, so I will. And then he goes to the cross without ever committing any sin and dies on a Roman executionary stake in order to satisfy the wrath of God on your sin and mine. And he says, if you trust me, if you believe that I've done this for you, then I give you my righteousness and I take your sin from you. It's the greatest story. It's the greatest truth in the history of mankind in the world. It's perfectly free by his free gift of grace. And it's a life-changing thing. That's the gospel. And if you have never put your faith in Jesus, I would beg you, today is the day for that. There is life in no one else. There is meaning and purpose in no one else. The enemy, the serpent in the garden, he's going to want to tell you, no. That's not true. There's actually life and meaning and purpose everywhere. But let me ask you, you've probably tried that. You've tried that a long time. And you are getting a sneaking suspicion that he's lying to you because you've never seen or felt meaning and purpose. And I would just say that's the Holy Spirit of God saying, yes, he is a liar and murderer from the beginning. There is life nowhere else other than Jesus. Trust in Jesus today and find new life. Not only abundant now, but eternal forever. And something that can't be taken from you. It's the greatest news ever. Jesus came on a donkey and he says, fear not, your king is coming to you in peace. I'll warn you, he's returning not on a donkey but on a horse. And he's coming back in power. He's coming back in power. He's never been unpowerful, but he came first in peace for the greatest news ever. Now watch, continue. Verse 16, the disciples didn't understand these things until after Jesus was glorified. Then they looked back and remembered that it was written and these things happened to him. And so this is a fulfillment of what he'll say in a couple of days to his disciples. Hey, after I'm gone, the Holy Spirit is going to come and remind you of all things. And we see it, that's what's happening. Verse 17. So the people who were with him when he called Lazarus out of the tomb and raised him from the dead continue to testify about him. Let me ask you, are you doing that, by the way? Because when we talked about Lazarus, we said to you and to me that in many real ways, not any of you, I don't think, at least I don't know the story, maybe you can enlighten me, not any of you actually died physically. Your heart stopped, your brain stopped, and then we buried you in the ground, and God raised you up out of the dirt. But if you've put your faith in Jesus, that's true of all of us in the real sense of the spiritual truth. That we have died with Christ when we put our faith in him and been raised to new life. So in a way, spiritually, which is, I think is more real than physical, spiritually, you are all a bunch of Lazaruses. You're all Lazarus. And so you have a testimony. And these people who weren't Lazarus are walking around saying, yeah, this is the guy who raised him from the dead. And they didn't, do you see it in the text? They never stopped talking about it. Is that you? My daughter was praying earlier in our prayer service before. She was like, the word boldness just comes to mind. She was praying that all of us would have the boldness to say the things that need to be said, to have hope in Jesus, and to be clear about it and say, hey, she didn't say this, but she could have. Hey, we're all Lazarus. Why would we not tell everybody, yeah, I once was dead, but Jesus brought me back to life again? Let me tell you a great story. That story can happen to you too. They all testified about him. I love it. Verse 18, for this reason, people also went out to meet him because they'd heard he had performed this sign. So the Pharisees, they're always there, right? Dun, 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 in the corner, guys in the dark hoods, smoking small cigarettes. Probably, I just see them, they're just angry. Can't have this guy, all right? And so the irony, John's irony is they don't want this to happen, but they're blaming each other, and they say, look, you're not doing any good. The world has gone after him. And that's the whole point of the Gospel of John. Whole point of the Gospel of John is that Jesus, the Son of God, the only source of life, comes and gives an opportunity for the whole world. So the ironic thing in the mouth of the Pharisees, of course they don't believe it, they're being hyperbolic, but John says, yeah, it's happening. And then the very next sentence, look at the very next sentence. Now there were some Greeks there. You see the connection? The whole world has gone after him. Oh, by the way, we're in Jerusalem, the holy city, the capital city, for the most important feast of the whole calendar, and now there's some Greeks there. The whole world has gone after him. Some Greeks are actually coming after him. Now, these are probably not men from Greece, although they might be. The term can be those who speak Greek or live in a Greco-Roman city other than Jerusalem, but they're coming to the feast because obviously they want to worship God. They're not Jews, otherwise they would have been called something else, but they're Greeks, and they come to Philip, and then Philip goes to Andrew because he doesn't know what to do, and then Philip and Andrew go, well, let's do it together, and they come to Jesus, and they say, hey, some Greeks want to interview you. And we are not interested at all in the Greeks. Why? Because Jesus doesn't even answer their question. They don't even ask a question. They're introduced in the story to illustrate one thing. The world was coming after Jesus. The world was seeking life in the person of Jesus. And then Jesus answers them. They don't have a question in our text. Perhaps Jesus had a conversation with these Greeks, but he chooses this moment to say something profound. Look at verse 23 on the screen. The final slide. And Jesus answered them saying, the hour has come. 4 words, just pause there. If you've been tracking with us through John, then you know something about those 4 words. The hour has come. If you're unfamiliar with the Gospel of John, if you're new to the scriptures, no problem at all. I'm so glad. Because you get to read them for the first time. And the first time is beautiful. The 101st time is even better. but the first time is beautiful. And so if you just want to open up the scriptures and start reading in the Gospel of John, be a great place to start. Don't start in the beginning of the book. It's an unusual book. You can start in Genesis, no problem. Better place to start, perhaps, if you're totally new, would be at the beginning of the Gospel of John. What you'll see there is that this Jesus is called the Word, and he is eternal. He always was. And he came to show us the Father. And as he began to walk as an adult now, living much of his life in relative anonymity, begins to call disciples. And the first thing that happens after he calls some disciples is there's a wedding, and his mom is there, and he is invited with some of his disciples, and there's a bit of a crisis, like social embarrassment for that particular culture. They run out of wine early in a 7-day. You think a reception of 7 hours, you ain't got nothing. 7-day reception at a Jewish wedding. And they're responsible to feed everyone and to drink everyone, to give everyone drinks rather for the whole week. That's an expensive deal, and if you run out, it kind of causes shame on the family, honor-shame culture. And so they tell Mary. Mary comes and tells Jesus, hey, we got a problem. And do you remember what he said? He says, woman, why what is this between you and me? My hour has not yet come. That's chapter 2 from the beginning of the gospel. We've been clued into this hour. He says it many times, my hour is not yet here. And as he begins to speak of it, we recognize this hour is important. This hour is not 60 minutes. This hour is the season of time when Jesus will be glorified. And we don't know exactly what that means until we begin to start going through the story. In chapter 2, after that, he goes into the temple and turns the tables over. He probably does that twice. That's the first time. In chapter 3, he meets with Nicodemus and shares the gospel. You must be born again. It's really, really beautiful. He has some other conversations that are important. At the end of chapter 3 and chapter 4, he meets with the Samaritan woman, and then the disciples come back and question him, and then he shares the gospel with all of the village of Samaria. Many people believe in him. In chapter 5 is where everything begins to fall apart because he heals a lame man on a Saturday. We've been here. He's like a Sabbath, and the Pharisees are out, and that's when their cigarettes are getting smart, and they're like, he must be destroyed because he healed a guy on a Sabbath, and it's not good, and so we must kill him. And so the Pharisees, the leaders, are plotting to kill Jesus from chapter 5. Chapter 6, he feeds everybody miraculously, walks on water, has these moments with the disciples. Chapter 7 begins these feast interactions that are really, really powerful. If anyone is thirsty, let him come to me. If anyone is thirsty, let him come to me. I'm the light of the world. In chapter 8, in chapter 9, heals a blind man. In chapter 10, we start getting closer to the end of the Feast of the Dedication. He has more moments. In chapter 11, the greatest sign so far, he raises up Lazarus. Chapter 12, Mary anoints him. And now he says to Greeks, the hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. You can just leave it up there, Ashley, if you want. The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Again, we don't know exactly what that glorification means, but he's going to tell us. Look at verse 24. Truly, truly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone, but if it dies, it bears much fruit. He's now explaining what it means to be glorified. Jesus says, the hour has come for the Son of Man, that's his word for himself, to be glorified. Now let me explain what that means. It means death and bearing much fruit. Okay. Verse 25 is even harder. He who loves his life loses it. He who hates his life in this world will keep it to life eternal. And then in verse 26, he sort of recaps the whole. These are some powerful words of Jesus. If anyone serves me, he must follow me, and where I am, there my servant will be also. If anyone serves me, the Father will honor him. Do you want to be honored by the Father? Wow, big question. Do you want the God of all gods, the only eternal Father, creator of all things, do you want him to honor you? That's wild. It even sounds a little sacrilegious to even say, right? Why would God honor me? Jesus says, if you serve me, follow me, the Father will honor you. That's wild. But look, verse 24, truly, truly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. And then verse 25 is an invitation. And I told you the most beautiful thing, 2 points of application, right? We've already done the first. That's the gospel, the good news message, that the king has come on a donkey and he has come in peace. And you have an opportunity to put your faith in him and find life eternal and abundant right now and forever. The best news ever. Now, the hardest news is this. That the lie of Eden from our enemy is still operative in you and me. But Jesus says, I have the antivirus to the virus. The virus of the enemy in the garden. Can you think with me if you're familiar with Genesis chapter 3? The virus of the enemy in the garden, the liar, who Jesus says is a liar and a murderer from the beginning, is this way. God's way for you, Adam and Eve, not good. Your own way is better. We could put it in these terms. God's will for your life, not great, not good. He's holding out on you. Your will for your life, better, better. Choose that. This is Jesus' antivirus to that virus. It says this, hey, listen, your way, this is the way you've been living, die to that way. Die to that way. And then seek this way. It's the best way. It's the undoing of Eden. It's essentially Gethsemane. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, we have the story of Jesus going into Gethsemane. John doesn't have exactly the same thing. We have a version of it. We'll see it next week. We have a version of it. But as he goes into the Garden of Gethsemane, he's praying and praying and praying. 3 times he goes and prays. Remember what Gethsemane means? I told you a second ago. It's at the base of the Mount of Olives. Gethsemane means olive press, right? How many times in the ancient Near Eastern culture do they press olives? Well, they press it 3 times. Now you can go and get olive press. That's first cold press or second cold press. Third press was usually reserved for specific purposes. But in Jesus' day, you pressed olives 3 times. He's at the base of the Mount of Olives in a garden called the Olive Press, and he goes 3 times to pray. And the last time he prays so passionately that the capillaries in his skin burst and blood comes out. He's being pressed like olives. And what does he say? He says, God, Father, if there's any way for this cup to be taken from me, my way is this way. If there's any way for the cup to be taken of me, please do it. But not my way, your way. Not my will be done, your will be done. The answer, the antivirus to the Eden lie of the devil is Gethsemane, is dying to yourself. Now let's talk about that for a second. Augustine of Hippo would say this. He would say the definition of sacrifice. I love this definition. Definition of sacrifice is surrendering something of value for something else of greater value. Pretty simple, right? Well, until you get to that first part, surrendering something of value, something that I really love, like my way. Spending time with dear friends yesterday, my daughter and I, and we're talking to one of them about how she entered college at UT Austin, that small secular school down at the Capitol, right? And so she was there and she entered in as an art major. And she would say, my testimony, meeting Jesus, turned, now she wouldn't say it this way, these are my words, turned from my best way, my best idea, there's nothing wrong with art, to nursing. And we were talking yesterday about how many, hundreds, maybe thousands of lives as a oncology nurse, as a hospice nurse, that she has changed. Not her way. There's nothing wrong with art, but God's way. I remember I was telling her I was in the reverse. I was going to Texas A&M, the Christian college in the small town here. I was going to Texas A&M to go to med school. And when I first understood the gospel and put my faith in Jesus, God began to say to me, your will for your life is not my will for your life. Nothing wrong with medicine, helping people, right? Mine was the opposite story. No, I don't want you to go into medicine. I want you to serve the church. And I was like, I don't know what that means. So I had to surrender something of value for something else of greater value. That's what sacrifice is. So what does it mean to die to yourself, to die to your way. This is what I told you is the single hardest thing that Jesus will ever ask you to do. It's the heart of discipleship. It's what it means to follow him. He says, if you follow me, then there are certain things that must be true, okay? Think about following. I'm a simple guy, right? I just want to break things down simply. If Jesus says, follow me, as he did to his disciples, as he's saying to you, what does that mean? Well, at least a couple of things. One, it means I can't choose the path. I'm just being real simple, right? Jesus says, follow me, and he's moving, and he's always moving. Then I don't get to tell Jesus, hey, can you take a right up here? I'd really like to go to the right. He's like, no, I'm leading, you're following me, okay? And so one, it means I don't get to choose the path, right? Two, my role is just to stay near him. My role is actually to just stay close. Follow is about proximity. I can't lag behind because then I'll lose him. He'll go over the horizon and I won't see where he's going, right? Very, very simple. My way is something that I must sacrifice, dying to yourself. I read a pastor who interviewed a psychologist. Psychologist has been meeting with people for 40 years. And he said, got a couple questions for you, Doc. He's like, sure, man. He said, in all of your 4 decades of experience, what's the biggest regret of all of your clients, just generally speaking? He's like, oh, that's easy. And he's like, easy? I thought that was a hard question. He goes, no, it's easy. It's regret. You're like, regret of what? Or what's the biggest regret? It's regret of selfishness, is what he said. He's like, what do you mean selfishness? They're always like, I wish I was a better father. I wish I was a better husband. I wish I was a better wife. I wish I was a harder worker. I wish I was more honest, whatever. It's regretting selfishness, the times when their way took them from the better way. And he's like, selfishness, the biggest regret. He goes, hands down, biggest regret. He says, how many of all of your patients over 40 years have come to see you expressly because of selfishness? And he said, 0. That's a discovery that they make over time. And here's the reality is almost none of us see ourselves as selfish individuals. This is part of the self-discovery process, and it's part of the reason why dying to yourself is so difficult, because you're like, I'm a good person. I'm a really good person. In fact, they did a survey recently of college students, and 75% of the college students said they were above average. Let that sink in for a little bit, right? 80% of them says they were on the upper end of morality. 80%. You're like, the math don't math when it comes to that, right? And again, now we're comparing students to other students. I get it. But generally speaking, we think that we're doing pretty good. And many of us probably are. But you can be doing good in your own path, honoring God. And God says, man, you know, my way would be so much better. My way would be so much better. What I'm asking you to do is to surrender the lie of Eden. And the lie of Eden is God's way is difficult. He's going to send you to be a missionary in Africa. It's really, really hard. You're going to be poor your whole life, all these kinds of things. Your knees are going to wear out because you're just kneeling and praying all day. God's way is so boring. It's not good. It's holding out on you. Your way is better. Your way is better. And God goes, no, all of that is a lie. That's not an accurate description of my way, and your way isn't better. My way is always better. So what you have to do is slowly, and this takes a lifetime really, in fits and starts, it takes a lifetime to understand what it means to die to yourself. The lie is there. Many of us don't believe it. You know Harry Houdini? Remember that guy? He would get out of all this stuff and he'd go into cities, Northeast, New York and all this stuff, and he'd go in and he'd drum up a big crowd and he could throw them in the water with all these locks and he'd come out. He was the master of escape. In order to drum up attention to his shows, he would often go to his city and have the city take him to the prison in the city and lock him in the jail, and then in a matter of moments he would get out. Well, in a particular city, the jailer knew he was coming and he had an idea. He's like, oh, I'll show Mr. Houdini. And he did. A whole crowd comes, dozens and dozens of people. It's a little foretaste of what he's going to do in the big show, right? Just to drum up. And they put him in the thing, and the jailer comes, all right, Mr. Houdini, get in there. He puts the key into the door and turns it the wrong way. Leaves it unlocked. Nobody knows that but him. Turns it the wrong way, watches the key, and then they step back. And then Harry's doing all this stuff, figuring out this thing, and he gets in there, and he repeatedly locks himself in the door. And he's like, that didn't work. And he goes again, repeatedly locks himself. It was the only jail he could never get out of. And then they were like, he finally says, I confess, I can't do it. The jailer's like, it was open the whole time. You were the one locking. He was like, what? It was the only time. That's the lie of the enemy. The lie of the enemy is much like that. You're locking yourself in to a prison when God says it's open. I've got a great broad way for you. It's a beautiful life, my way, better than your way. The hardest thing you'll ever do in this life is the slow process of burying your own way, dying to your own will, refusing to bow down to the idol of self in all of its small little manifestations. And you know what happens when you do that? You find your life. You find it. Matthew, Mark, and Luke all have the same statements. One of the statements that all of the Gospels have, verse 25, he who loves his life here loses it. In fact, that word loses way too soft. It means to destroy in the Greek. He who loves his life here, clamps down on my way, destroys it. And he who hates, as a comparison, Semitic Hebrew idiom, doesn't choose or not to choose. It's like Esau, Jacob I loved and Esau I hated. It's not about love and hate. It's a Hebrew idiom to say, Jacob I chose, Esau I didn't. This is the same idiom. If you choose your own way, you'll destroy it. But if you choose my way and not choose your way, then you will find this life and keep it for life eternal. Now watch, if anyone serves me, he must follow me. Where I am, there will my servant be also. If anyone serves me, Father will honor him. Wow. I still can't wrap my head. I got to tell you, I'm a rookie at understanding that last idea. If we serve Jesus and follow him, that the Father will honor us. I don't understand what that means. It's a little kind of scary for me to even picture it. I can tell you the thing that kept coming to mind this week was my brother, younger brother, only sibling, 5 years younger than me. His name's Travis. He's like so smart, way smarter than me and always has been. He was a Marine for a good amount of time, went to 3 tours in the Middle East. In his final tour, he was wounded, shot 5 times by a bad guy with an AK-47 and barely survived, had to come back, relearn how to walk, whole bunch of surgeries, medically retired as a sergeant, doing well. He was shot at the end of 2004. It took well over a year to even get back into a wheelchair to begin to learn how to walk with a cane. But sometime in the beginning of 2006, he comes back to my hometown, where we were both born and grew up. 400 or so people. One road has a stripe on it, right? There's probably less than 100 houses in the city itself, because a lot of people live out on farms, or maybe more like 75 houses, I don't know. It's the tiniest town. I've been to smaller, but not few. Not many, rather. And so in the beginning of 2006, the city organized a parade for my brother. It started at the church, the end of the road with the stripe, and it ended at the school, the other end of the road, the same road, only road with the stripe. He couldn't walk really well then, and so they had a red convertible someone owned in the city. They decorated it with red, white, and blue bunting. They had all the local dignitaries, all 2 of them right there in the thing, you know, the town librarian and the guy who changes the tires and stuff. And all of that was going, but the whole town, my kids were there. Andrew was just a baby. I think maybe Izzy hadn't even been born yet. No, she was just a baby. Yeah, early 2006. She was just a few months old. And we were there. I think we were in one of the cars. We were riding in one of the cars. And the whole town came out to honor my little brother for what he did in our U.S. military. Almost gave his life. Some of his friends did give their life. And I just have this picture. And I talked to my brother about that. And he said, I felt two ways about it. One, I'm so very honored. And the second part is I feel like it was unnecessary. I didn't like all that attention on me. And I get that. He's a humble guy. But this, can you imagine? Can you imagine in some way the life that you lived if you said no to your way and then you say, I want to do things God's way? At some point, God pulls you over to himself in the kingdom of heaven. And he says, hey, everybody, be quiet for a second. I want to tell you about this guy. I want to tell you about this lady. I'm so proud of her. So proud of her. I want to honor her because she died to her own way of doing things. And she slowly, painfully, the hardest thing I've ever asked any of my children to do, she slowly chose my way. And she found her life. She served Jesus, my son, and followed him. And I am so proud. I want to honor this daughter. I want to honor this son. Can you imagine? That's even the feeblest description. But that's a picture that can be a motivation for the rest of my life. I have to be honest with you. That picture could, if I walk in the Spirit, inspire me for the rest of my life. Not for my own name, God gets all the honor, but for him to pull me close and say, I'm so proud of you. Not just the well done, good and faithful servant, which is beautiful, but this is my son, my beloved son. I am so proud of him. How do we do that? Trust in the gospel, the greatest news ever. And then after that, slowly over your life, sacrifice and surrender your way for something of greater value, God's way. That's the way you find your life. It's the essence of discipleship. It's the heart of it. And when you do that, when you serve Jesus and follow him, the Father's going to honor you just like he honors Jesus. It's a beautiful thing, mind-blowing thing.